Not much going on in games this week, but there is finally a surprisingly decent Steam sale going on. Let's bolster that backlog. One of my favorite turn-based strategy games is Final Fantasy Tactics, and this game is heavily based on that. Although, I have to admit, this might not be for everyone. It took me about 30 minutes to actually get started with the game. There's just so much talking. Other than that, this has all the staples you're expecting from a game based on Final Fantasy Tactics. Great combat, deep job system, and a fun story with multiple different paths and endings. Have you ever done one of those team building days for your work or something like that? I remember doing one with my dad's work a long time ago, but it was this giant ball the team had to get across a field. With the catch being, somebody had to be on top of that ball while it was moving. I still feel my chafed knees. The Wonderful 101 reminds me a lot of that team building exercise. You play as a group of heroes in an over-the-top action story. Lots of crazy boss fights and epicness going on. It's not a perfect game, and I found some of the boss fights infuriating actually, but it's still really fun. Also, it's not really a turn-based game, but I still wanted to put it on the list anyway. One of my most vivid memories is when I arrived in the US as a 20-year-old by myself with just a suitcase and a backpack in the winter in New York. It was less than pleasant, but it's nothing compared to the Settlers in Against the Storm, a roguelike base builder like nothing you've played before. When playing base builders, my favorite part is the beginning, setting everything up, and that's what Against the Storm leans into. You'll set up your base, get everything up and running, complete the objectives, and move on. Each base won't take you much longer than an hour or so, but you unlock more stuff and challenges for the next base, and on and on. This might sound tedious, but it's really well done. Give it a try. This is a phenomenal game. Great battles, amazing story, really cool graphical art style, it has it all. But when I think back on my time with Dragon Quest XI, what I mostly remember is how much I enjoyed my companions. They just feel like friends, and when you lose one, it feels like that too. Great classic RPG, and man, that mid-game twist is awesome. Alright, I'll just come right out with it. I know people very much don't like the remake of Tactics Ogre. I've seen the reviews, battles get repetitive, the card system is bad, game pacing, I've seen all the complaints. Yet, I still very much enjoy this game. Story is just great, and granted maybe the game's not worth $50, but now on a 50% discount, I think it's certainly worth it. And for the record, I agree, the PSP version is probably much better. I know from experience that the likelihood of me enjoying a full Xcom is much higher when I boot it up and get almost overwhelmed by the number of options to choose from. So I knew as soon as I began Age of Wonders 4, this was a relationship meant to be. The number of races, all with their own units, strengths, weaknesses and playstyles is incredible. Other than this, expect lots of epic battles in a magical world, very much a fantasy civilization. But man, so much customizing. When you play games like Xenoblade Chronicles, Final Fantasy Tactics or even the earlier mentioned Project Triangle strategy, what is it that draws you into those games? For me, it's always the story and characters. When I played Octopath Traveler 1, I didn't like it at all, and you can probably guess why. 8 completely disjointed storylines. Playing Octopath Traveler 2, I had pretty low expectations. This was probably going to be another decent turn-based strategy game with 8 short, disconnected stories. Octopath Traveler 2 fixes my biggest gripe with the first game. Stories feel so much more connected and the plot of the game feels much more engaging. Fun, classic, turn-based strategy game I would highly recommend. I have to admit I haven't played Wargroove 2 yet, but Wargroove 1 is an amazing turn-based strategy game very much inspired by the Advanced Wars series. And going by the reviews of number 2, with its biggest flaw being that it's basically the first game with a new campaign, I don't think there's very much to worry about. I've already added this to my collection and I'll let you know how it is. Sometimes after a stressful day at work or school, you just need some time to decompress. You play a round of Call of Duty or be a badass in God of War, but sometimes you just need something relaxing, and that's where Preserve comes in. An easygoing, low-key puzzler, where you put together different tiles of nature to build a symbiotic ecosystem. You know the type. Certain tiles work well together while they shouldn't be placed next to other tiles. Tiles even get placed vertically for even more complicated puzzles. And your reward for doing well, even more complicated puzzles. You might even create some of those natural wonders. Pretty cool. Yes, I know, Xcom Chimera Squad is nowhere near as good as Xcom 2, which is also on sale by the way. But it's not as bad as people make it out to be. Yes, it's not hardcore like Xcom 2 and the gameplay is much less in depth, shorter missions and stuff like that, but on the whole, I'd say, if you're going with the right mindset, this game is still very enjoyable. Plus, it's on a $2.99 sale, worth a pickup if you ask me. If I were to put together a top 3 roguelike games list of all time, I think it would be a close battle between Isaac, Hades and Darkest Dungeon. I honestly don't know which one will come out on top. Having said that, there is nothing better than taking down eldritch abominations with your party of a nun, highwayman, grave robber and jester, while the narrator yells in your ear,
"Survival is a tenuous proposition in this sprawling tomb.
Such an amazing game. I'll never not put this on the list. When I think of pirates, mostly what comes to mind is this.
What's your purpose in Port Royal, Mr. Smith? And no lies.
All right then. I confess. It is my intention to commandeer one of these ships, pick up a crew and Tortuga, raid, pillage, plunder, and otherwise pilfer my Weasley black guts out.
Not usually robot pirates with godlike ricochet powers. And if you're wondering if turn-based ricochet battles are your jam, don't worry, I wondered the same thing when I played the first one years ago. And this one is just as good, if not better. There's even real-time seafaring. And I mean, robot pirates, how can it not be good? When Subset Games, the makers of FTL, another one of my favorite roguelikes, said they weren't going to work on FTL or a sequel anymore, I was disappointed to say the least. Especially when they came out with the concept of their new game. A cartoony mech game that telegraphs where and what your enemies are going to do. But as it turns out, my concerns were unwarranted, and the fact that every move is telegraphed leads to some amazing tactical depth. If you haven't picked this up yet, give it a try. After I made my video about games like Xcom, the comment I saw most was, where the heck is Phoenix Point? Apparently I'd missed one of the most important Xcom likes in existence. I've since rectified this massive oversight and played it for a little while. And yes, this game is great. It has a lot of problems, but it's very much an Xcom sequel. Which makes sense because most of the Xcom development team has worked on this. I still don't think it's as great as Xcom 2, but it's a very good second. And while we're on games like Xcom, let's talk about Xenonauts 2 as well. This is basically a direct copy of those early Xcom games. Yes, the ones from the 90s. If you're looking for a deep tactical, turn-based strategy alien invasion game with some gameplay imbalances, but in fairness it's still in early access, this game is for you. I've thought about setting up my own business many times before, but I never really know what to get into. Maybe dropshipping or pressure washing or maybe even real estate. I don't know, but what I do know is that I don't want to start a mercenary company. If there's one thing that Battlebrothers has taught me is that mercenary companies are meant to fail. Give the game a try. Start your mercenary company and see how you fare in this deviously difficult turn-based strategy game. Other than that, great game though. So I don't think we have enough classic JRPGs on the list yet. So let's change that right now with Bravely Default 2. And let me warn you, this is a JRPG in every sense of the word. And that means the game can get a bit grindy. Everything else you'd expect is here. There's an ultimate evil to fight, turn-based battles with an interesting risk and reward system where you gain or save moves depending on how brave you feel. And an excellent job classes system. Great game if you're into this kind of stuff. And you know what we can never have too much of? Gorgeous pixel art. And if there's one thing that Star Renegades has, it's that. But it is so much more than that. In many ways, the timeline-based battle system with its focus on counters and critical hits to interrupt enemies reminds me a lot of Into the Breach. It's all about holding off that enemy and causing interrupts and delays. Oh, and the story of you and your band of renegades trying to stop an evil empire from destroying the galaxy is pretty fun too. Finally, another decent Steam sale. I was getting worried that I hadn't bought any games for over a week. Check here for 11 of the best Resident Evil-like games, and I hope to see you in the next one.